Um, these are informal meetings, so feel free to type in the chat or come off mute at any point. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to have your questions. We'd love to get to know you. So yeah, please feel free. And yeah, I would love to have people say hi or make an announcement.
So I'll make an announcement. We're working on a series of business programming to do through 11 months of the year, with one done each month, that people can come to all of them or just one of them or whatever they want. And we're looking for some information on how you find mentors and how you get mentors in small business. So if anybody has um, information on what they recommend for patrons on how they find mentors, I will put my work email in chat. And if you would like to email me, I would greatly appreciate that, because it's different when you're a librarian looking for a mentor than when you're in small business and trying to start a small business to find a mentor. So if anybody has any assistance, I would love that.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm looking, I know that the Gwinnett County Library, their volunteer coordinator helps to match people with mentors. I don't see them here today, but I can help connect you after if nobody else chimes in. Amanda tells us that she has a business basics series at the end of July with 2 classes targeted at refugees and immigrants. First class is how to start a business in Colorado. And the second class is intro to computers. Very nice. Awesome. I like the state specific. I think that's a really good idea.
Thanks. Yeah, here in Colorado, it's a very unusual situation. We have a plethora of organizations offering business classes. So the libraries don't have to do it nearly as much. And so if we're going to do something, it has to be really, really targeted, or they just don't come.
Yeah. Thanks for that. We'll look forward to hearing how it goes. Hey, Rosalind, good to see you. Hey, Kelly. Hey, Patty. Gracia says they're doing an AI August series in Brooklyn. Cool. I know that's in demand for a lot of people. Think about the AI. Oh, here's Terry. Hey, Terry.
Hello.
Rachel was just asking us about matching people with business mentors. So I thought, yeah, I thought you all would be really helpful with that.
Yes.
Rachel, if you don't mind dropping your email in the chat again, I think Terry would be a great person for you to talk to.
I'll put my information in. Okay. I got you, Rachel.
Anybody else? What's going on?
So I don't have a camera today, which nobody should be sad about. But if it's okay, I thought I would mention that because I've been horrible about letting you know, you and Jim know, Megan, that I did participate as a panelist recently in a session, the Economic Future Forum, which is like the International Economic Development Council's conference, was in Spokane, Washington, Eastern Washington recently. And I and a colleague were part of a panel discussion that was titled Local Libraries as Entrepreneurship Incubators. And so my colleague Mark Pond and I talked about our local partnership with a website called startupspokane.com, where we've pooled all of our regional resources together so that we can be providing consistent and equitable services to the small business owners and entrepreneurs in the greater Spokane region. And I was a little nervous about this because there's a lot of people, from chambers and economic development groups and things like that. But we had a lot of really great response, and we were 2 of 4 panelists. The other panelists were from western side of the state, from Seattle, and had some great information about a program they're doing with Indian American with the Indian American community over there, but it was a great opportunity to mention the Libraries Build Business Playbook and let everybody in the room know libraries can help and want to help the business community, and they want to help those government agencies and organizations that are in the community work collaboratively and not be duplicating a bunch of things. So I was so surprised pleasantly at the questions we got, and I mentioned some of the challenges that we face as libraries as far as people seeing us as competition because we're offering things for free that other entities pay for or charge for, and that sometimes when you work with a group, they don't necessarily want you to help because they don't want to change the feel of their small town, or they don't want a bigger group to come in and take over. So it was a really great talk, and I appreciate Jim and Megan making this happen so that we could participate and help get the word out. So hopefully people came from all over the country and are going to be getting into touch with their local public libraries after this conference. So
That's awesome, Stacy. Congrats. I'm glad everything was a positive experience
thank you.
and good work. Thanks for representing us. Very good. Lucretia's dropped a ton of good info and links in the chat. At Brooklyn, they're doing a creative entrepreneur series as well. Super cool. Anybody else?
Have something new that's going to start actually this afternoon. The local economic development nonprofit got a $150,000 grant from Business Oregon to start a Southern Oregon Innovation Hub, which is basically a clearinghouse for information for entrepreneurs in Southern Oregon, Jackson and Josephine counties. And I'm on the committee to govern it, mostly because I pointed out you have a ton of information to organize, and that is what I do. So you need me. So anyway, I'm excited about that. They've got some money to play with, and they're going to hire somebody to be the steward for this hub. So we'll see what happens, but I'm excited to do that.
Nice. Yeah, that's great.
Rosalind, I feel like we'll have to talk after because we're also working with Business Oregon to do the statewide ecosystem map of that, where they'll help empower the different innovation hubs.
Cool.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Yes, let's do that.
Hi, everyone. Kelly here from North Liberty Library in North Liberty, Iowa. Two things that we're planning for the fall. We're planning our second annual Business Beyond Borders event. I currently have 2 panelists signed up, so I'm looking for 3 more. And the theme is going to be immigrants who live in our community, and who are also entrepreneurs. But we're shooting for like Gen Y, so we're looking for millennial and younger entrepreneurs. So we're looking at those 2 generations of entrepreneurs for this event. And then another event that just came to me yesterday, I went to a meeting about the state small business credit initiative. It's something that's happening here in Iowa where the state is going to be funding different resources and funding entrepreneurs on a reimbursement basis. So they invest in consulting with local partners about their business to get them started, and the state reimburses that money to them. So it's something that's starting to bubble up to the surface here in Iowa. So we're hoping to create an event here at the library so that the stakeholders can have a platform to introduce this to our patrons as well. So we're very excited for the fall.
Nice. Very good work, Kelly. Yeah, again, look forward to hearing more as it develops. I've got just a couple of announcements. So most of you probably already know about our other Libraries Build Business resources. If you're not already connected to us on the Slack page, I encourage you to do so. That's a great place to get updates and announcements about our events, and you can feel free to ask questions or share your own updates. It's just an open space for peer-to-peer conversation. And then we also have a YouTube page. Yes, Lucretia, I'll drop that in the chat. We have a YouTube page where we post all of our recordings of our monthly meetings. So if you've missed a meeting, or if there was a meeting that you wanted to go back and review, then we have all of those on our YouTube page, and I'll drop that in the chat. So definitely check out those resources, and stay connected with us there. So this is a monthly series, like I said, but so for August, and we typically cancel the August meeting. So we will not meet in August. So we'll be back. We'll give everybody 1 hour back in the summer to go get an ice cream cone. I don't know. And we'll be back again in September. So the same always, we're always looking for guest facilitators or presenters. If you're interested in sharing something that you're working on in a more long form, definitely let me know. I'd love to have you. So that would be great. And we still have some availability for, I think, September for sure, and December. So yeah, would love to have you if you're thinking about that. Did anybody go to ALA annual conference? No? Well, that's okay. It was great. But I just heard word that we are opening our submissions for proposals for the winter conference, the LibLearnX, next Monday. So if you're interested in presenting at a conference, if you've got a cool business idea, stay tuned for that. We'll definitely post the link in Slack when it goes live. And so this year's LibLearnX is in January 25 in Phoenix, Arizona. And then finally in conference news, is anybody attending the ARSL conference in Massachusetts in September? Just wondering, because I will be there and I would love to connect with people that might be there. Doesn't look like anybody in this group today, but yeah, always just wanting to meet with folks if they're where I am. So, okay. Any final thoughts before we turn it over to Kevin? Okay, Kevin, the floor is yours. Thanks so much for being here with us.
Likewise, I really appreciate the opportunity. Here we go. Yeah, thanks, Megan. I know we were talking about this months ago. We were joking earlier about how it feels like time truly does fly. We're also at the PLA conference, where kept hearing more and more about the idea of how ecosystem mapping can be applicable to the libraries. And what I'd love to do today is just share a little bit of kind of the why and how of mapping a community ecosystem. And I'll get more into what the heck an ecosystem is, what mapping it means, all of that. And really appreciate the chance here. So if you have any questions, feel free to just even interrupt me. I do not like to monologue on and on. I love when it's more interactive. I have some questions. I'm also good at awkward silence. So if I ask a question and no one responds for a few seconds, totally fine. But I just want to give that the open floor. So before we fully dive into it, I wanted to play a quick video that we created along with our partners here at EBSCO. So really the idea of trying to figure out what can ecosystem mapping do for a library that's truly unique than just an economic development tool or business support tool. And we had, based on a true story, a thought experiment of how an ecosystem map can support someone, Henry, that is looking to make a career change and really apply their learned life experience into a business despite being a first-time founder. So I'll play this and hopefully it'll resonate a bit with situations that are familiar to you.
Meet Henry. After 30 years as a high school educator, Henry is ready to do something different with his retirement years. Several of his former teacher friends have started businesses or consulting services, and the idea of doing the same appeals to him. For many years, Henry and his wife provided homemade chocolate chip cookies and ice cream at school events. His family recipe was always a big hit among his students and colleagues. He wonders, would people pay for the delicious treats he has been giving away for free? Henry talks with some of his entrepreneur friends and soon heads to his public library to find books on food trucks and business planning. When it comes to launching his dream business, Henry is not alone. Many emerging entrepreneurs turn to their library for the answers to their questions. At his local library, Henry finds books, databases, programs, and a friendly reference librarian named Lisa. While the books he borrows help him discover what he might need to do to launch a profitable business, Henry is left wondering, who in my community can actually help me get started? What he really wants is to talk with someone who could provide him with the information and guidance he needs. Someone, Lisa determines, who is already running a successful food truck business. Using EcoMap, Lisa searches her library's community resources and finds a local small business incubator that supports food trucks. She is also able to connect Henry with professionals who can provide him with legal advice and tax assistance. Henry leaves the library feeling positive and determined. Lisa is always looking for people like Henry to help nurture the next generation of small business owners, and is planning to start an entrepreneurial training program at the library. Lisa tells Henry that with his teaching background, he'd be the perfect instructor. Henry happily agrees, and when he officially gets his food truck business off the ground a year later, he welcomes the opportunity to pay it forward. Mapping your library's ecosystem can help match individuals like Henry to the resources they need to realize their dreams and achieve their goals. Learn how EcoMap can help.
All right. Now how to get out of this. Give me a sec. You'd think it would just be hitting the exit full screen button. Okay. All right, if you're still with me. So I wanted to show that really to give an overview of what ecosystem mapping in general can do. I will caveat, I do not want this to be a sales pitch. I want this to be more informative more than anything about what the value is of ecosystem mapping, whether you use us, whether you use any free tools that we can recommend, or even just do it internally. Why do we do it? Even when I was listening to some of the announcements at this call, a lot of it feels like ecosystem, so things that ecosystem mapping can help with when it comes to figuring out what mentors might be available that you can connect someone with, what programs already exist that you need to, so you don't have to create your own program when there's one a few blocks away that might be a really good fit for what you're looking for. And it's at this really critical time in our society now, especially post-COVID, where a lot of people are thinking of how do you get a little more entrepreneurial when it comes to your work and your life. So there's a study that was put out by Hanover Research last year about how a lot of big generation of folks are really reevaluating based on what their current interests, skills, and values are. How much feasible might it be to actually explore their own business? And libraries themselves are starting to feel some of that crunch. So 2023 was the highest number on record for new businesses that were started. So 5.5 million that were formally filed, whether LLC, C Corp, something like that. Over 50% increase from 2019, the last pre-COVID year. So in this study that Library Journal and EBSCO did last year, a lot of librarians said they expected to see more increased demand from entrepreneurs and small business, and then likewise increased demand for people looking to do a career change or seek a new job. And that was another really key finding the study found, is that when they asked about what advice they would give to entrepreneurial librarians that were seeking to expand their services, over half the colleagues advised they'd want to find out what community resources were available. And importantly, how do you build effective partnerships with them as well? So it's one thing to just know that, hey, they exist, but then to know the person behind that and really know the mechanisms of how that program can support the patrons that come in your door is a really big value of understanding the ecosystem. So maybe somewhat rhetorical question, but how do libraries currently identify and provide relevant resources to the Henrys of the world? Anyone want to chime in? Well, I would argue it takes an ecosystem approach. And that's something that I know ALA and the Library as Well Business knows very well. You speak ecosystem, sometimes have to come in here, and I will actually define the next slide what an ecosystem is. But just having that kind of mindset that this is not just one library that lives in isolation. It's really libraries are all connected to each other. That's one version of an ecosystem. But every library is an anchor within their own community's ecosystem, whether it be for entrepreneurial support or social services. Libraries are these trusted institutions that really have a duty and a really unique responsibility to provide these services, not all out of their own, create all these new programs all the time, but really to help be a navigator and understand, like, being a essential navigator, a trusted navigator can build a really strong ecosystem and have really strong spillover effects too for the patrons that come in your doors. So with that, here's a question for the crowd. How would you currently define an ecosystem? Whether it's a synonym, short sentence, what comes to mind? It's a bit of a buzzword, no? It's like when people say synergy. It's like, what the heck does synergy mean? All right, I have a
I think
definition.
an ecosystem. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
I was just going to say, I think an ecosystem has like a bunch of different moving parts that all work together, right? So like different kinds of, like somebody said, a map of assets. It's different groups of people that work together for a singular goal.
Yep, that's a really good definition. I know Carly, hi Carly, a group of resources in a specific field, a map of assets. ALA actually defined a library ecosystem as the interconnected network of all types of libraries, library workers, volunteers, associations that provide and facilitate library services for these different stakeholders. And we have a fairly similar definition. We would define them as ever-changing networks of organizations, resources, and people, along with news, events, and opportunities that are united by some kind of common or shared characteristic. And we break it down this way because to us, these are all what we would call assets, and how you would define it, how you would categorize them, how you would track to make sure they're updated will change for each of them, but they're really the core components that make up an ecosystem. And we see ecosystems as being everywhere. Oftentimes when people use the word ecosystem, they'll kind of naturally mean an entrepreneurial ecosystem or innovation ecosystem. You might have heard business ecosystem. And that's really what we started thinking of ecosystems as. But when we've kept doing this work and we've kept uncovering different use cases, and really how we now describe ourselves as ecosystem agnostic as a company, because we realize that there's really no shortage of ways you can kind of slice and dice it up and create subsections of an ecosystem. Like here in Baltimore, where we're based, we've mapped out Baltimore's tech community, Baltimore's Black small business community, the artist ecosystem, the nonprofit ecosystem, and then the state of Maryland on top of that. And those are all some kind of shared Venn diagram as well. So it's really, really interesting to see how people think of an ecosystem, like what is the closest definition, but what are the all the ways that they overlap when you map them out. So there's just some real examples, and we do believe every institution is building or managing an ecosystem, whether or not they are aware of it. Is the same type of way we can think of Virginia's biotech ecosystem. What are the incubators and the wet lab space and the funding opportunities? Same structure applies to an affordable housing ecosystem, where you can map out what are all the low-income housing tax credits and Section 8s, and what are the various resources for workforce development that can be applied there. The same as one of my favorite ones, which I did not think was an ecosystem until someone told us it was, the Philately Live, which is a stamp collecting ecosystem, which is made up of auction houses and clubs and networks all around the world, that has never really been fully united before. So ecosystems can be super powerful, and they have the potential of really, really catalyzing, knowledge transfer, information access, getting the right person to the right resource at the right time. But there are some problems with ecosystems. And the main problem is that they're very complex. Like this jellyfish-looking network graph is just one visualization of an ecosystem. It's not what an EcoMap looks like. But the idea of, you can see that there's these like nodes and edges and connection points, and some are siloed, some are more connected, and it's really tough to understand, at a glance, or even with in-depth research, what is going on within an ecosystem. So anything that can be used to help demystify it is super helpful. And really, it's a big of an informational challenge. This is really what our founder discovered when she was starting this company out of Johns Hopkins. So the quick backstory is, I used to work out of Johns Hopkins University here in Baltimore in their entrepreneurship center. And our founder was a junior at the time who moved from Tucson, Arizona to Baltimore, didn't really know a soul. And she wanted to understand how to get better plugged into the entrepreneurial community. Surely there must be a one-stop shop someone can go to in the city of Baltimore to understand what are all the mentor opportunities, what are all the networks, what are all the funding, what are all the business supports, only to find nothing like that existed. So like any good entrepreneur, she spent some time researching the problem and really became problem obsessed with the idea of, why are ecosystems inaccessible? And she discovered it was really a data problem, information problem more than anything. One being that ecosystems are invisible. They don't naturally, you can't naturally see them all. They exist at a base level, but unless you have a way to kind of diagram who's connected to what even exists in the first place, you don't know what you don't know, especially if you're an outsider to that ecosystem. They can be inaccessible as well. So even if you, let's say, have some links or have some ideas of a starting point, unless you're able to really dive into that data and really help people use the information that's being provided rather than the information just existing in some kind of CSV spreadsheet or some kind of outdated directory, that makes it harder to access. And then they're inefficient as well. They can be inefficient, mainly because if you look back at this example, like it's pretty hard to make a very efficient ecosystem when everything is so interconnected. And ecosystems, I would argue, are not ever going to be 100% efficient. There's always going to be some kind of spillover or silos or misalignment. But as much as you can try to get them efficient, then that's where the true power lies. So this is what we try to answer as a company, and really just like our guiding belief of how do we help people understand who is doing what around us. And by making that information more accessible, we can create more equitable outcomes, but really help get people on the right path that they need to be on in order to accomplish whatever their goal is within the ecosystem. So yeah, the problem really does lie with the data. So we found that ecosystem data being decentralized, this can mean it lives in different spreadsheets, it lives in people's heads, it lives across different websites. Having a centralized source of data can be much more helpful than having a decentralized source of data, especially when that decentralized source of data is just a lot of people and a lot of kind of a tacit knowledge that builds up in people's heads. Ecosystem data often becomes very static as well. So I think it was Rachel was talking about doing a map on their own, and I think it's really helpful once you're putting in information into a database. But the one big thing to be cautious of is how quickly it can go out of date, especially when it goes to specific program level data. There's dates and deadlines, programs come and go, especially post-COVID. New programs emerge to meet certain challenges and demands, and then other ones subside. And if you're not careful, it can be a database that just becomes more and more outdated over time as new things get added and deleted. It can be untargeted as well. We've seen some databases that are full of like 30,000 different assets, and a lot of them are not helpful, or they're just articles about things, or they go for the more is more as opposed to less is more approach. So being able to make sure you define your ecosystem and target the information you're trying to provide within it. So when someone comes to it, it looks applicable to them, and it's not just something for everyone, which can oftentimes be something for no one. And importantly, we like to think about how we can relation the data. So for example, flat information being like, here's just a bunch of programs that exist in a vacuum, as opposed to being able to capture which organizations are providing which programs, who might have partnered with you on certain initiatives, who has utilized certain programs or been a part of certain organizations. That data can be super helpful when it comes to getting a fuller picture of the ecosystem and its effectiveness. So I talked a little bit about silos, but just helpful to kind of visualize. This is the less jellyfish farm, a little bit more tangible, but it might make intuitive sense too if you're one of those more connected nodes. So think of maybe like the bottom node here. You're much more likely to be able to make the right recommendation if someone comes your way and maybe a new entrant to ecosystem comes and they get connected to you. If you're able to understand who else is doing what around you, as opposed to just operating in your own world and saying, we do this one program, we do this program really well, but no one really knows about it, or you have a hard time understanding who your partners are that are doing similar shared mission work, it can, there's less ways to actually traverse the ecosystem and understand what routes there are in order to move forward. So why do we actually ecosystem map then? So what we would call ecosystem mapping is the process of identifying assets within your ecosystem to answer that golden question, who is doing what? We did not come up with the term ecosystem map. Some of you, especially if you have a sociology background, you might have heard of that term before with the assets and edges and nodes of trying to understand what is connected within like a care environment, or how do you connect people with what they need throughout that. But we've taken it to mean something a little different, and we have a new method, and happy to share a little bit of that and also some of the existing ways that people do it. So why do we do it? One is the base level of just understanding the existing landscape. So again, got to know who's doing what before you can build additional programs or decide if things are duplicative. which is the second part, helping to inform maybe there is nothing that exists to support female founders in biotech in a certain region. And now that you have a good understanding of that, you can do something about it rather than not knowing in the first place. Third, it's more the navigational side of things. So helping connect people with ecosystem assets, meaning, a program is only as valuable as it is utilized. If let's say there's an amazing funding opportunity that goes unclaimed, or it could have been a right fit for someone, but they just didn't know about it. That's an example of ecosystem unalignment or disalignment. So addressing those silos and promoting collaboration. So if there's people that are working on a similar shared problem within the ecosystem, they should have an understanding of what they're doing, as opposed to operating in a vacuum. And it can also help solve some meaningful problems. So some system level problems. When you do an ecosystem map, you get to kind of take it the 1,000-foot, 10,000-foot approach of seeing all the pieces of the puzzle on the table and getting to make some strategic connections that you might not be able to see when you're in the weeds of your day-to-day work. Ultimately, the whole goal is to create more equitable and accessible ecosystems, depending on what you're working on. So another thing it can help do is answer some questions like this. So these are all examples for the entrepreneurial ecosystem, but just imagine if you're mapping out the social services, how can I find food bank, free health services, homelessness shelters? How can I find any other kind of wraparound support, workforce development, right? So that's really kind of a guiding starting question. And ideally, these types of things are grouped and related. If you're, again, trying to be helpful to everyone or make it so broad, it might be hard to show the value for a specific purpose, but this is where, defining your ecosystem comes into play, which I believe I'm getting to soon. Ultimately, what ecosystem mapping will help solve is going from that existence to utilization spectrum, as we like to call it. So ecosystem mapping, I should say, is not a panacea. This is not like the silver bullet that once you do it, all of a sudden everything is aligned, you're at one with the world. But it can be a helpful bridge to get from existence to utilizing, because even without ecosystem mapping, it all still exists, right? It's still, if programs exist and organizations exist and people exist, and they're doing some sort of shared work, doesn't matter if there's a nice, neat platform that details it all out, it's still happening. But where it can be super helpful is identifying who is doing that what, and then helping others understand who's doing what, so they don't have to do their own ecosystem mapping to understand. It's more of a shared communal benefit. And once you have that identification and awareness, that's when you can get more into the understanding. So more than just understanding that, or more than just knowing that, oh, great, someone's doing this program. You can do some more higher level work when it comes to, where are the strengths and gaps, what programs could be incentivized, what organizations maybe should partner. And then finally, it's that navigational side of things. So how do you create that connection? So when someone doesn't know, I don't have to talk to Megan, to talk to Rachel, to talk to Duncan. It can be more of a streamlined connection and reduce some of the human inefficiencies that exist, while helping people do what they do best, which is make connections and kind of care on a deeper level than AI or machines. So a couple of reasons it's hard. Mainly because it's kind of a pain in the ass to do some of this work. And we know our first version was very manual. So Mechanical Turk, if you will, of just going out and Googling a bunch of stuff and creating a spreadsheet and putting it all in there and then trying to figure out how to keep it up to date over time. But it's very difficult and very time consuming, because one, it's hard to actually understand, what is the data you're trying to collect and what are the different categories or keywords you want to use. That's really foundational work, time consuming. So again, it was a lot of late nights Googling things and playing around on an Airtable sheet, which I'll show you an example of pretty soon. It's really hard to get stakeholders to contribute. So I'm interested, for the folks that have done this already, what's the methodology? Is it more of self-research, or are you sending surveys out? I've often found that can be helpful to send surveys out when people reply to it, but you spend a lot of your time hounding people, trying to get them to answer a survey. And the paradox is, the busier they are, the more they're probably doing, and the less likely they're going to respond to your survey. Keeping that data up to date over time. So that's a huge need. That's something that we're not able to solve for at first, but have brought technology into play the best that I can to keep things up to date, knowing that technology is not perfect and you're not going to have 100%, but kind of raising the floor for what that looks like. But then once you have all this information, how do you actually help people get to that, that other end of the curve of understanding and utilizing the information that exists, rather than it just being there? All right. So now we get into some actionable stuff. So the first step for an ecosystem map is understanding the paradigm you're trying to create. And I feel like librarians probably know better than most about paradigms and how to kind of create these structured, a structured list of different keywords and assets that you're trying to map out. So it's really important to have some shared language because in the business world, especially, everyone thinks they're running an accelerator program when in reality you have maybe a co-working space or it's an incubator or you're just a coffee shop people hang out at, which is totally fine. But it's important to understand what that actually is and make sure you're comparing apples to apples across it before you start going out and doing the compilation. Because if you start doing the compilation and then you want to change your paradigm halfway through, personal experience, it's going to take a lot of time to rectify that or go back and make sure things are tagged correctly, or you add a new field, then you have to go back and maybe you already got 150 different assets on that, then you have to add more to it. So just a good foundational layer. And we do that through what we call keywording. So that's the idea of being able to assign these different navigable keywords when people are going on our platform and searching for, I want to find funding for Black founders working in healthcare and life sciences, and maybe I'm an early stage company. We can use that to narrow down if we have, call it, 600 assets in a certain EcoMap, and maybe you want to find the 3 to 4 that might be a relevant fit. It's a helpful way to get to where you're trying to go. And then structure of a paradigm is really a threefold. So one, being descriptive. So that's a lot of just, as you see their name, description, email, website. So that's more of the kind of free response type of answers. Making it categorical is important. So that's when you start to be able to divide it down. So what audience is it for, whether it's gender, race, age, veteran status. These are all things that can be helpful. The purpose, what is it actually for? Is it to provide funding? Is it to provide mentorship, support? And then, what does it actually do? And then the relational part as well. So, who's actually hosting that resource or that program? Who's used it? Who's partnering together? So that can be helpful to give you more insights on how the ecosystem's functioning and how it's all interconnected. So a quick example of this from one of our platforms would be this thing called the TEDCO Builder Fund. I picked that because it's actually something that we as EcoMap have been able to utilize. It was really transformational for us early stage. So it's essentially $200,000 in a convertible note that this public-private partner in the state of Maryland gives to certain startup companies that apply for it. So what we're able to do is we are able to go right to the source, to the TEDCO website, pull it in. So if that information ever changes, we get a notification and we can make that change. So at a base level understanding, you can read a few sentences, understand what it's for. Categorically, you can understand, all the different filters or keywords that you can use to get to it. So for example, it's primarily focused on economically underserved founders. So we're able to lay that out in audience type, as well as just for entrepreneurs, startup founders, the industries that it's good for, the type of resource that it is, in addition to the stage of company that it's good for. And then we can also map out that TEDCO Maryland hosts the TEDCO Builder Fund. Surprise. And if you were to click on the TEDCO resource or the organizational profile page here, you would see all the different resources that TEDCO hosts. So it's not just as one thing, but instead, by kind of following this trail, you can find out maybe if you didn't even know TEDCO existed, if you just search for funding opportunities for Black founders in the healthcare and life science space, and then you come on to this and then to TEDCO, you can really start to understand what are all the different resources and organizations at your disposal within the ecosystem. The next step is actually collecting the data. So this is an example of an Airtable spreadsheet. Has anyone used Airtable before? Throw a yes in the chat or thumbs up. It's a great tool. It's a great free tool. I love Airtable. Like our MVP for EcoMap was literally an Airtable database embedded into a WordPress site because that proved the minimum value we needed, right? It was just here's all the information, here's how you can navigate it. We needed to get a little more sophisticated over time to actually be able to sell this, but that was what our founder did when she was in college. And what you can do though is once you set up an effective paradigm, this is when you can start filling it in. So what we did was we had one big tab for all the organizations, and then we had another big tab for all the resources. Airtable by nature is a relational database, so you can actually tag, if you're TEDCO Maryland, you can input all the different resources in the different tag and then associate it with TEDCO. So you can start to get a bit of that relational data. but also it kind of provides more structure where if you're doing all these multi-select fields, you're able to define that ahead of time. So you're more of just kind of filling in the blanks of, what this is based on either its own description or some inside knowledge you might have about the program. And then once you're able to fill that all in, you have a pretty good working database. So a good way to help gather all that information. And I did mention I have a template. I might have to clean it up a little bit, but if anyone's like really interested in this template, I'm happy to send it on. I can even modify it for libraries because I think it's a little bit broader right now. But just again, it's a really easy, free way to get started, especially if you have maybe a summer intern that wants to take a crack at converting some kind of database that you already have into a more navigable, updatable database. And you can even embed an Airtable right into your library site. You can really put it anywhere. And you can do a surprisingly large amount of work on Airtable for free. They have, my side note, in my opinion, their pricing strategy is all wrong. We should be paying them a lot more money, but we're not. So that's good for everyone involved. Next step and final step for that is really helping to display and utilize the data. So a few different ways to do that. One, again, I'm not trying to make this a sales pitch. I won't show you like how exactly do that within EcoMap, but I think it's the reason that's really important to understand, the data on a deeper level is being able to track, for example, platform, engagement, growth, how people are finding it when they're coming back. That idea of being able to capture additional information about what your users or your patrons are actually looking for, super valuable. And you don't get that just from putting out a platform or like a resource library on your own site. But one thing that we do as EcoMap is we help update information. So as new organizations come into play or new programs are created, we're able to track that asset growth over time and provide that back to our customers. Like, hey, here's what people are visiting. Here's when they're coming. Here's what they're looking at. And that's super valuable for new program creation and kind of focus on what you're looking to focus on as a library. Last thing I'll say on this is a testimonial, but I kept it in for this because we have an amazing customer at the state of Indiana from the Economic Development Corporation there. And this is something I think rings true for a lot of locations. I won't say all. Every once in a while, someone will say, like, I promise you, there are no entrepreneurial resources in our area. And for the most part, there are a good amount, but they're just kind of scattered, decentralized. Every once in a while, there truly is like a resource desert. But Morgan was saying in Indiana, they have an abundance of resources available, but historically they haven't been accessible. So just that ability to be able to provide some kind of on-demand navigation support was really special and helped to unite the state in a way that hadn't been united before. So I thought that was cool. I have only a few more minutes left, so I'm respectful of time. Anyone have any questions on that before I go on?
I just want to know, how often should you update your ecosystem map? Because we had one that we did several years ago and it's just so out of date now that we find ourselves having to do it again. So it's just like a lot of work to go back from scratch.
Yeah, the true answer would be as capacity allows, right? So finding these shortcuts, like before we had our whole kind of backend system to do it, we would use kind of a rudimentary system of like link checkers. And it's not foolproof, but there's to find the name for it. But if you just Google like link checker or URL updater, you can essentially put in a bunch of different websites and then it'll check to see if they're broken or not. So that's like a high level way of like, hey, does this program or organization no longer exist and their website is totally gone? That's a quick way of identifying errors for it. We do ours on a weekly basis now because we are essentially tracking all the different websites that we pull into our platform. And if something gets changed on the platform, we get notifications and then our team goes on the back end and either approves or rejects those suggested updates. Again, that can be a lot though for one organization, especially if understaffed. So I would say monthly or quarterly, depending on capacity, or just kind of like a thing to bake into a routine. But it's it just depends as capacity allows. Cool. Anything else? All right. So a few things I'll just note quickly is about AI. So we are an AI enabled company. I'm almost hesitant to say that because like every company is an AI company now. But we know it's only as valuable as you're able to use it. And truthfully, it's just advancing at an incredibly rapid rate. And I'm not the AI expert. I'm just the business guy on our team, but we have a team that really a lot of their big job is to follow and stay on top of this, because as AI and the tech that is leveraging it continues to improve, ecosystems will continue to be impacted. So on the individual level, what that looks like, and you're probably already experiencing this in some way, is your daily work. For example, I have a hunch that a good amount of people here probably have used ChatGPT at some point in the last month or so, maybe even on a weekly or daily basis in order to get work done, or some like automation. Zapier is a great tool too if you're looking to, create what they call trigger flows, where if you, let's say, upon someone submitting a request into the library system, you can trigger a bunch of things to automatically happen, as opposed to someone manually having to go through each step every single time. So there's on that individual level. On the workforce level, as we've already seen too, jobs are being automated away. A lot of it is the retail space, trucking, fast food, but there's gonna be no shortage of jobs. In fact, most jobs will be impacted in some way, shape, or form. Doesn't mean they'll inevitably go away, but the nature of different roles will change. And that'll also change how businesses hire. We're a 35-person company here in Baltimore, and we're kind of on a high growth trajectory. At the same time, we don't want to be one of those companies that hires hundreds of people and then all of a sudden fires hundreds of people a year later because we realized, we hired too quickly for what we truly need. So the idea is that all businesses, a lot of especially growth startups, are thinking about that now of, how can you leverage it in a way that's meaningful, and use it to not replace jobs, but kind of enhance people's jobs and do more with less. But what that does do is free up a lot of time, or should free up some time, to focus more on system change, on creating the partnerships, on having this like open line of communication with your other stakeholders, whether it's intra-library or within the community. I think that's something that AI can help do by freeing up some time. Y'all have used chatbots, so we'll talk about that. But yeah, ideally there will be more time for that relationship building, which is something uniquely human. I will be scared of the day that GPT can start forming deep and human relationships with people. So that's definitely one thing that we shine at. So being able to do things like create ecosystem gatherings or meetings, spending more time on getting experts in the room, as opposed to like answering those navigational questions, doing the strategic collaboration sessions, and then just again making those connections is something that you really can't replace with AI, nor should we want to. So one of the last slides I have here is just kind of thinking about how we navigate ecosystems, and navigate in general from the beginning of time, I'll say, to now. So there's more steps than 5, I promise, but at a quick glimpse. So starting out, a lot of the way we navigated was through just trying to follow the stars, follow the sun, and use that to just get directionally in the right way. Eventually, we were able to create some rudimentary maps of different places and use that as opposed to just following on astrological navigation. The middle, again, quite a few steps. Then we had MapQuest. So I'm fairly young, but not young enough to have been. I still was in the MapQuest era where I'd print out the instructions and I'd help my parents navigate, and they'd get upset if I missed a turn, and then we'd have to go back and find it again. So it was still an improvement, because I was giving you directions, as opposed to just trying to follow a map, but still not quite what GPS navigation was. So that was a huge advancement, especially when smartphones became more proliferate and you're able to have that in your pocket of where you're trying to go. But finally, now we have Uber, which I wouldn't say finally. I don't think we've hit peak. We've hit the end of transportation or end of navigation with Uber, but the idea of you don't even have to navigate anymore. You just have to get someone to take you to a custom destination and drop you off there. And I'd argue that's a lot of what we try to do with ecosystem mapping and ecosystem building and support in general, is trying to find the right path for the right person, with least amount of steps, least amount of friction, just getting people to where they want to go, and making it easy for them to do so. So I will stop there. Really appreciate your time, Megan, and everyone else that's stayed around to listen, and happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks, everyone. So yeah, we have a few minutes if anyone has questions about eco mapping or about Kevin's presentation.
And Megan, I made a few updates since I sent the preview to you a couple of days ago. So give me I might even make a few more tweaks, and then yeah, I can drop my contact info. But then I can send it to you to send on out. And likewise, let me also work on that Airtable. So I'll try to get those both like later tonight, and then maybe tomorrow you can send it out to the group.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll post resources in our Slack. People can take a look at those. Yeah, but we have a few minutes, so if anyone wants to ask a question, either in the chat or coming off mute, like feel free.
Well, I have a question. Is this meant for librarians to use to help patrons, or is it something that I would like put up on my website and say, here, patron, use this?
That's a good question. It can be both. So a lot of our customers, it'll be some of it's totally self-service. Like the reason they went with us is because they want to be as hands-off as possible and just kind of have it's like a 24/7 concierge. When I was talking with our EBSCO partners, a lot of their thinking was it'd be both, where librarians could one use it to get a better understanding of who are the community partners, and then also have it as a way of like a patron can come on at any time. And so we do create a standalone platform. It can be linked to your website. It can be its own thing separately. You can put a chatbot on your site. There's a lot of different kind of flavors of it, but typically some combination of both. Airtable. So yeah, Fred, we used Airtable as our version 1 of an EcoMap. So it was probably 2019 into 2020. We are no longer currently using it. It just wasn't something we could scale on the same way when we had like a couple beta customers and free clients. So what we would do though is we would use Airtable to fill out all the information about the resources and the organizations. And then Airtable has a way you can get some like embed code from it, and then you can just drop it right in your own website. You can stylize it. So that's what we really use it for, is like housing the data and creating the paradigm for it. Yeah, definitely encourage anyone, just sign up, free account. It's kind of fun to play around with. They have a lot of templates as well. Like this is just scratching the surface of what Airtable can do. It's a really cool product. So not paid to buy them, but can't endorse it enough. I will say one other use case I've seen for Airtable, and this is someone was mentioning this earlier, of how to like create a more visible mentor network. So you can map organizations, you can map resources. One thing we don't really do typically is map people, because like people don't want to find themselves on a platform they didn't sign up for. But what people can do is, especially on Airtable, if people opt in, or like you create a survey and someone says, like, yes, I want to mentor, you can use it to create a mentor database, and then have that displayed on your site, or just have it internally. Someone comes in and says, hey, I'm working on this. I'm Henry, I want to start a food truck. And you have a database of people, and you can filter by food and beverage, or filter on, however specific you want to get. You could use it that way. Thanks, Ellen. So we do I probably should have gone over that more, but I was trying to rein in sales mode. So we do the mapping. So we can take whatever data you currently have and help transform that into the database. But we also built tech that can go out and scan a bunch of other websites and kind of bring that all in. The analogy we use is like Yelp for ecosystem. So kind of create a standardized look into it where people can navigate it. And then we keep it up to date too, which is a big part of the value. Yeah, thank you. Right. I think that might be it. Are we out of class 5 minutes early?
Thanks again, Kevin. This was great. And thanks for sharing all of your resources. I dropped a quick exit ticket in the chat. So this is just a 3-question feedback form to let me know what you thought of the session today and what you're looking for from these sessions. So please take a second to fill that out. Yeah, and it was great to see everyone. Like I said, August is canceled, so we'll see you again in September. Have a great summer. I'll leave the line open for a minute if anybody wants to hang back and chat, but otherwise, have a great rest of your afternoon. And thanks again for everyone for being here, and Kevin for being here. Thank you.
A pleasure. Thank you.